Welcome to STMU SET Spotlight, where we explore the stories and people shaping the future of science, technology, and education. Joining me today is Dr. Lori Boies, Research Professor of the Department of Biological Science. Lori, I'm so glad you're here today. There's so much to talk about, but let's start with something simple. How has this year been for you at St. Mary's, and what's exciting in this moment in your work?
Okay, great. It's wonderful to be here as well, Paul. Thank you for having me. So I think probably one of the most exciting things that's going on right now is we are in the process of rolling out our Medical Genomics Master's Program, and that's launching fall 2026. And it's just great. Right now, we're talking to many different people interested in the program, getting to know them, people not only at St. Mary's, but across the nation and even around the world. We have interest from people from other countries because it's online, asynchronous. So I think it's just really fun to see how that's taking shape. And it's exciting to roll out a new program. Probably a little bit of a feather in the cap is recently, I did some research with Dr. Terry Shackelford on allopreening in birds, which is a little different than our normal focus on research. And the New York Times had picked up that research article and had discussed it. And so that was kind of just a fun feather in the cap, so to say. Yeah.
Wonderful. Kudos on the New York Times article.
Thank you.
And this Masters of Science in Medical Genomics that's launching fall 2026, can you tell us what is medical genomics and why is it so important now?
Yeah, that's great. So medical genomics is really a fast-paced and emerging field as whole genome sequencing as well as exome sequencing is getting cheaper and faster, and it allows us to really understand genetic variation, not just a single gene saying, what does that one gene look like, but what is that entire genome? And so your entire genome is all the DNA that you have in your body. And so we have found that there are areas of the genome that do not have genetic variation, meaning they don't have a mutation in them, but they maybe that particular area is silent. So that's what we would call like epigenetics, where you don't have something expressed because of previous exposures, potentially to environmental chemicals, environmental factors, stress. There's a whole host of different things. So there's many different ways in which our genome is actually going to manifest in us. And so that is very important when we start talking about medicine. It's not just a black and white type of world that we maybe once thought about with genetics, where we have dominance and recessive. It's a very vast gray area of you may have a gene, but it may not be expressed the way you think it's going to be expressed. And so there's a lot of different ways in which it's going to manifest itself. So that's something that's really important, looking at that genetic variation that we see in the genome. But also within that, because we have whole genome sequencing that is very fast, and over time it has gotten incredibly cheap to do that, as well as whole exome sequencing, we are using this not only for cancer diagnoses, which has been done for a long time, but we are also now looking at genomics in terms of rare disease diagnoses, pharmacogenomics, and how are you going to respond to different drugs that you are given, as well as prenatal diagnoses. So there's a lot of different avenues within this. It's somewhat scary as we start talking about what is that basic filament that makes us us, right? That's our entire genome. That is what makes us. There's people looking at ways in which we can edit it with CRISPR. So there's, exciting pieces part of it, but there's also some of those pieces that make us give pause and sometimes are a little bit scary, but it's an exciting new field that we're embarking on.
Sounds like it would be a great cornerstone leaping off into a lot of other disciplines.
Yes, absolutely.
This program sounds unique, especially for students who are balancing work or looking for flexible, future-ready training. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I myself went back into the master's while I was at St. Mary's as a full-time faculty member. So I understand that maybe you want to go back and you want to get more education, but you have your own career. And so we designed it and developed it to be flexible no matter what area you are in life, or whatever that chapter looks like. Maybe you've just finished your undergraduate degree and you want to go straight into the master's. That's great. Maybe you're already in a career and you want some more education and more training in something. We made it to where everything is online. It's asynchronous, so you can log in at 10 a.m. or you could log in at 11 p.m., really, or whatever time that works for you. And so that makes it available and flexible for as many people as possible. The faculty members are still going to be available via Zoom. You can do it from San Antonio, Texas. You can do it from New York City. You can do it really anywhere in the world. So that was really our idea of providing the ability for students, no matter what stage they're in, to get the access to this education if they wanted it.
What are the kinds of technological ways that you're doing what might have been lab work that would have been done in person when you're doing these kinds of courses asynchronously or virtually.
Yeah, so all of our labs are going to be online as well, but they're going to be much more computational based. So when we look at genomics, we're looking really at large data sets. And so you're not only, there is a wet lab component where you could sequence the information, but we're not actually going to be doing the sequencing. We're going to do the next step after that. We're going to be saying, all right, you have all this information. It is a massive amount of information. And how do you pick through it? And how do you find the trends that you're looking for? And really, that is a little bit of what are you interested in? Do you want to do a genome-wide association study where you are looking at all the different genetic variations across hopefully potentially thousands of people to get to the right number that you need for that type of study, to see are there certain pieces of genetic variation that are going to make you more susceptible to disease, for example, hypertension or a different outcome. Are you looking at this because you're trying to trace something through evolution? So we can use genomics to look at how evolution has happened over time by understanding the way those genes work. So we use real data sets for the students to actually go in and get that hands-on experience, but it's going to be very computational based. So they're still getting science training, but it's not necessarily wet lab training because we are online. But being able to do computational work is also going to be very important as we go forward.
Sounds wonderful. Lots of data science.
Yeah.
Say something about the career paths that you might envision for graduates of this program. What sorts of things are at their hands as a result of this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I like to joke, it's a little bit of a choose your own adventure, right? So sometimes you go to a specific school and you're being trained for something very specific with a narrow focus. The focus of this is really what is interesting to that student. Do they want to go work in a lab and do that data science? You can do data science. Do you want to be a clinical trial manager? We can work on avenues to get you there. So there's roles in, the lab, there's roles in hospitals. But I think also another role that is, I think, very interesting and not something students think about a lot is we need people on that public health side of it. We need individuals looking at how does genomics play a role in disease susceptibility across different populations. And so there's that public health component of it as well. But we also need individuals who actually understand the science, who can inform policy, because being able to understand what is the actual science behind it, being able to understand the ethics behind it is going to be very important as we go forward, because to be honest, we can't expect all the people who are at the high levels to be able to understand the science and the ethics behind that science and why it works, because not everybody is trained to that level. They need good, solid policy advisors and policy analysts behind them. We also need medical science liaisons. So I think that's also a avenue that's not always considered by biology or science majors as they're going forward. They're thinking, I need to be in a lab, but we actually do also need individuals who are educated in the different fields to make strong recommendations to those who are in the power to make decisions for us, right? So what is ethical, especially when we talk about CRISPR? Should we be editing genes in individuals? Should we be editing genes in utero? That are really big questions, and that really speaks to what is making us human. And that, I think, is what makes us unique here at a Catholic Marianist institution. We can really delve into those ethical questions as well. So I think, there's definitely the lab components and the hospital roles that we have, but also I think there's a unique cornerstone for us to say we actually train that whole individual and we can inform policy.
Say a little more about how you help students think responsibly about data privacy, clinical decision-making, or even broader societal impacts of genomics.
So one of the core classes is a bioethics class. And so all those different topics will be addressed within that. They'll have case studies they have to really delve into, really engaging questions that make them think. When it comes to ethics, again, it's not a black and white world. There's many shades of gray. And what may be considered ethical in one scenario, if you change a little bit, it makes you kind of feel icky, right? And so we really want to push students into thinking about what is the actual ethics behind this. How do we make decisions that are good not only for today, but for the long term? And genomic science is something that is a really big responsibility because, again, it goes to the core of who we are. And when we talk about data privacy, what does that really look like? I know many people have done, for example, like the 23andMe kits and things of that nature. Now your data is out there. What can it be used for? We do have the GINA Act that says you cannot use that against an individual looking for health insurance, but that doesn't apply to all facets of your life. That's very specific for health insurance. You can't use that as a pre-existing condition. But, all it takes is somebody to repeal an act like that. And so it's a very personal thing what your genomic data tells you about you. So I think that is a very important thing that we need to look into as to what is the ethics behind it and who has access to those things, and should we all be sequenced? There is a push to say all patients should be sequenced. So I know there are some hospital systems that are partnering with companies, for example, Helix, where they are really pushing for patients to come in and get their genome sequenced, and they're going to screen them for things like cholesterol, hypertension, cancer risks, things of that nature. And that is great because it allows physicians to make more informed decisions. But what are the long-term impacts of doing that? So I think we're kind of at that crossroads right now, and we don't have all the answers, and we hope to create graduates who can help us answer those questions.
I think it's really great to have the questions on the table,
right,
and be acknowledging that we have to work to do to get moving on some of those answers. So thinking about the mission of the institution, say more about how ethics, compassion, and service are integrated into the curriculum. And why is this important when students are preparing for work in medicine, biotech, and research?
Yeah, so I think kind of echoing what many of the things I just said, we are at this place that genomics is really that core of what makes you who you are. And so we want to make sure that that is protected. We want to make sure that we are valuing human life and the dignity of human life. We want to make sure if somebody is going to be using CRISPR, what does that actually look like, and what are the appropriate instances for that? It may be appropriate for somebody with a rare disease to go in and correct that issue so that they don't have to suffer anymore. It may not be fully appropriate to say, oh, I would really like to have a child with blue eyes and I have brown eyes. Let's make sure that we can edit it for that. So that's some of those, Brave New World type things that we're looking at. And they may sound like science fiction, but we do have the ability and the capacity to start making some of those decisions. And it could lead to a situation where you have individuals who are enhancing themselves through genomic editing and their offspring through genomic editing because they have the resources to do that, whereas others are not. And so that can increase the gap of, between different socioeconomic classes and things of that nature. So it becomes a bigger issue. And so there's the global societal issue part of it. Within healthcare, you're going, how do we make those decisions? If you find out that somebody has, a predisposition to a certain disease that there's no cure for, there's no way to help them, should we tell them? Right? If you're 20 years old and they say, well, you're going to have this awful death and there's nothing we can do about it, do we do that and tell somebody that's what they need to worry about for the next 30 years, right? So there's different pieces of it that we just really have to consider. And so I think, again, being at a Catholic Marianist institution, we are uniquely poised to really delve into those topics. And we talk about this not just in bioethics, but it's integrated into other courses like genes, genomes, and genomics, because it is a really important part of what we're doing.
You've mentioned how this program is fully online and asynchronous and designed for working professional and recent graduates. Say a little bit about what the timelines are for both the master's or the certificate that you offer.
Yeah, so we offer both a graduate certificate. The graduate certificate is 4 classes or 13 hours. That can be completed in one academic year, so a fall and a spring. The full master's, depending on what a student wants to do and what their commitment is and what else they are doing, they can complete the entire master's in a full year. So like a fall, a summer, and a fall, spring, and a summer. Or they could spread it out to a year and a half. Both of those options would be full-time status. Or you could do it 2 years or more. It really is up to the student. If you do the graduate certificate and you say, wow, I think this is awesome, I want to keep going, all those credits, or those 13 hours from the graduate certificate, are going to roll into the full 30-hour master's program. So it's a great way for students to get some graduate credit, say that they've done some work in this field, but not fully commit to the master's, and then take that information and apply it for the future as well. And then for our St. Mary students, we do have the 4+1 program, so they can start taking graduate classes as an undergraduate. As long as they're under that 18 hours of semester, the tuition is going to remain that undergraduate tuition. And so they can do 10 hours that are going to be double counted for undergraduate and graduate. And so it's a great program for them to start working on that master's. They can get pretty much halfway done with the master's while still an undergraduate student, and then finish it with one last year afterwards. So it's really what that student is going to be interested in and what that commitment is going to be. But again, we designed it so somebody could be a working professional, or let's say you're working to put yourself through college. You can still do that and not feel overwhelmed. As if you wanted to be a part-time student, you could do a 2-year program easily.
That's wonderful. Shifting gears, you also lead the undergraduate bioinformatics program, one of the most interdisciplinary programs that we have. How does that experience influence the way you're designing the graduate program?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So bioinformatics feeds into medical genomics in many ways. When we talk about these large data sets that you need to comb through and analyze, the base of that is going to be bioinformatics. So many of the courses that are part of the core for the medical genomics class or for the medical genomics curriculum can be double counted for the bioinformatics major and or minor. So we also offer the minor. So students can kind of start fast tracking themselves that way. If they already have an interest in the bioinformatics, then medical genomics is a nice, easy fit for that. So like biostatistics is going to be a class that bioinformatics as well as medical genomics needs to take, genes, genomes, and genomics. Within the electives for the medical genomics program, we do have bioinformatics programming with R. Again, it depends a little bit on what that individual wants to focus on as they graduate. Do they want to focus more on that bioinformatics side? They're going to take that class. If they want to focus more on the public health side, then they may want to take something like genetic epidemiology. So we kind of allow for a little bit of flexibility in that. But the bioinformatics program is a great program. Like you said, it's interdisciplinary. If you're a bioinformatics major, you can either do a biology minor, a computer science minor, or an applied mathematics minor. All those are great options. It really depends on the strong suit for that student. And I'm always trying to encourage students to do the minor in bioinformatics because I think it's a great way of really marrying everything together because the sciences are in some way are starting to merge. Biology is changing. It is becoming a more computational science and a data-driven science.
What's one research project that really shaped how you think about science today?
That's a great question. So I like to joke that I'm a jack of all trades, master of none, because I have done a wide variety of different projects. And I think that's just coming from, as a scientist, being innately curious and wanting to look at everything around me all the time. I think the one that's probably really shaped who I was as a scientist was probably working on those transgenic mouse models. If you go back to that, obviously I had an interest in genomes and genetic way back, when I was a graduate student. But that really taught me how to be a scientist. It taught me how to be curious, what we did is we were able to tag cells and watch them develop. And so these were neural stem cell populations within the brain. And so we were able to watch them develop through different, essentially timed sacrifices of the mice to see what did they become. They started here, and where did they end up as an adult? We would follow them sometimes for 2 years. And so we could see these cells. And the thing that really was the most amazing part of it all is I remember as a grad student, I would sit there, I'd be slicing mouse brains and putting them on slides and doing the staining. And it was sometimes would get tedious, but then when you would look under the microscope and they would just light up with all these different astrocytes and neurons and going, wow, I'm the only person in the world who's looking at this right now. This is so neat. And so how can this impact the future? And so I think when somebody wants to go into science and be a scientist, you want to make sure they have that wow moment and that they're really enjoying what they're doing and they feel that joy of just saying, like, this is a really cool thing to see. But you also have the process behind it, right? You have to do all the correct steps. And so that's a lot of what I try to instill in the students as to, yes, we all want that great outcome, but how do you do the correct steps up until that point to get there?
That's wonderful. And that ties in to my next question, which has to do with you mentoring students across many disciplines. What's your philosophy when it comes to helping them grow, especially in a field that can be as complex as genomics?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it, like I joked earlier, I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. I have multiple different projects that are going on. I've had students jump from annotating genes to doing a public health project, looking at like an epidemiological cross-sectional study. It really is what makes sense to you, what is interesting to you, and it's okay to change what is maybe your interest a little bit because that's how you find out who you are, and that's what I really want students to do. If they come and do research with me for a semester and they say, I really don't enjoy this, I said, that's okay. Go find what it is that you do enjoy, and that's the purpose of being here as an undergraduate, is being exposed to different pieces of the scientific puzzle and figuring out where it is you fit 100%. Sometimes they say, wow, this is amazing. I want to go to graduate school. That is great. That is perfect. Let's get you on the track to do that. Let's get summer internships for you. Let's get those connections made for you. And then sometimes they say, I do not like this at all. Okay, well, maybe you like wet bench, research more. Or sometimes I'll have students coming from bench work and they'll say, I really don't want to do bench work anymore. I said, let's look at the computational side. So I think how do we mentor them is really just exposing them to as much as possible and seeing what is exciting for them and making sure that we then run with that.
That's wonderful. You've also been deeply involved in the medical community and leadership, from local medical alliances to national committees. How has that shaped the way you see the intersection of science, healthcare, and society?
So I grew up in a really small town, one stoplight. Community was very important. And so those were some of the things that shaped me as a child, and I still believe it. And so being able to give back to the community through the different medical alliances, such as like the Texas Medical Association Alliance, the American Medical Association Alliance, those are great. They give back to the community through public health efforts, through education. They were really focused on making a healthier populace, but as well as healthier physician families. And so it's been really great. And it speaks to me in terms of it's in many ways, some of the things that we do are going to be very grounded in science. We've done vaccine drives. We've done things like hard hats for little heads, where we wanted to prevent traumatic brain injuries by providing bicycle helmets. And so that sounds like, well, everybody has a bicycle helmet. That's not true. Not everybody has a bicycle helmet. And I know when I was a kid, wearing a bicycle helmet was not considered cool, right? And so we were trying to figure out ways in which we could do that to prevent traumatic brain injuries, because we do see this. And so the alliances are organizations for physician spouses, and our spouses do see sometimes the worst case scenarios out of what can happen. And so we, are moved by that, and we want to help prevent those outcomes for it. So again, it's many times community, but also based in science, based as to what is needed in the community from that medical standpoint.
Public health seems like it's an ongoing educational process, because there's always new generations
Absolutely.
and so many changes coming about. To wrap things up, I know you enjoy exploring the natural world through photography. You mentioned your New York Times article with Dr. Shackelford. What does stepping outside the lab teach you about perspective, maybe even about science?
Yeah. So like I said, stay curious. That's one of the things I think is a hallmark of a scientist, is being curious about what's around you. And when you step outside, you realize, wow, we are really a part of this whole integrated system. It's not just about us. It's this whole integrated system that goes together, and you can sit out in nature and be quiet, and you can see the most beautiful things. And you realize, maybe we're not quite so different than some of the animals that we observe around us, right? They have their own communities. They have their own interactions. And sometimes you see that you can see friendships budding and out there. And sometimes you can see there is conflict in nature. And so it makes you really kind of give a little bit of perspective and a way of just stepping outside of our busy, hectic lives and realizing maybe getting back to nature is really important.
Indeed. As we look forward to fall 2026 and the official launch of the Master of Science in Medical Genomics, what excites you most?
I think just seeing who's going to come in that inaugural cohort, how we're all going to come together, and the different interests people are going to bring, I think that's going to be really exciting, and allowing those students to really go to their full capacity and potential as to what they can do on that next step, because there is so many different things that they can do, right? They can be in the lab, they can work in a hospital, maybe through running clinical trials, they can be policy analysts. What is it that they're interested in, and what changes that they're going to make for the future?
Thank you. That's wonderful. For someone who's curious or wants more information about the Medical Genomics program, where can they go to register or ask for more information?
Absolutely. So you can go to our website, which would be stmarytx.edu/master-medical-genomics. And we'd be happy to have a conversation with you.
Fantastic. On behalf of SET Spotlight, thank you, Dr. Boies, for joining us. We invite everyone to join us again for the next episode as we continue to highlight the people advancing science, engineering, and technology at St. Mary's University. Until then, elevate your excellence, shape excellent tomorrows.
All right.